Thanks to be here. This talk is about Symfony and AWS Lambda. Before start, I would like to know how many of you have already used a Lambda service. Raise the hand. Okay. And how many of you have already used a Lambda service with Symfony? One guy. Okay. Nice. So, my name is Alessandro Minoccheri and I am a software developer working in Flowing. I work usually in PHP and Node.js, and I love to contribute on open source library on GitHub and on the Stack Overflow community. You can find me on Twitter with this nickname, Minoccheri, or on GitHub with this nickname. When we talk about Lambda, we are talking about serverless. And the first time that I've heard this word, I've suddenly thought, oh my God, no server, no backend, no PHP, I will lose my job. And this thought scared me a lot for some weeks, until a day I have decided to understand well what does really mean serverless. And I have discovered that serverless doesn't mean that I will lose my job. Instead, we have a new amazing tool for our job, a new amazing tool to learn. And we love to learn, right? Because serverless means that you don't have to worry about server architecture, infrastructure, create servers. Because in this case, AWS takes care for the infrastructure for you. You don't have to create server, maintain, update. You can focus only on your code. And AWS Lambda is a serverless service provided by AWS. It's a function as a service, okay? And it provides to run code without provisioning or managing servers, events that can trigger our PHP code, and you pay only for the compute time you consume. The last point means that usually you pay the green area and the blue area together. You pay always the same money every month if you have a standard server, an EC2, a VPS. The blue area is the usage of the server, okay? With Lambda, you pay only the usage of the server. You can save a lot of money. And the cost is really cheap, $0.0000002 per request, and the first million of requests per month are free. If you need more CPU memory or more configuration, more complex, you need to pay more, but not so much. When was released Lambda, it supported only a few languages, and PHP wasn't one of them, clearly. But in the last year, AWS announced that Lambda support PHP implementation. I was really happy, and I have suddenly tried something without success. Because I have found this into the documentation. Lambda supported languages: Node.js, Python, Ruby, Go, C#, PowerShell. Where is PHP? How can I run my application? You have told me that Lambda support PHP now. Well, the previous announce really means that you can write into Lambda layer whatever you want. You can import files to manage your external dependencies. In our case, you need to import PHP binaries files. But those PHP binaries files aren't so easy to create. You need to follow the AWS rules. It's not easy to create, to update, and to maintain, because if you need a new extension, you have to update, and it's not very easy. But we are lucky, because a French developer has created an open source library called Bref that helps developers to deploy PHP application on Lambda, importing PHP binaries file into Lambda layer, PHP binaries file generated by Bref community. It provides PHP runtimes for AWS Lambda, a library to interface PHP code with Lambda API, a very rich documentation, deployment tools, and a very nice community. Usually, this is a standard schema of your Symfony application that communicate with Lambda via PHP FPM layer that manage your request and response with API gateway. And if you will deploy your application, you can see into your AWS console on your browser your application, and under that layers with your PHP imported files in. So, how to deploy your Symfony application? Requirements. You need an AWS account with an access key ID and a secret access key. Obviously, you have to create your Lambda. It's very easy. You need to install and configure Serverless framework. Pay attention, Serverless framework it's a library. Don't confuse it with Serverless word. You can be confused because they have the same name. Serverless framework it's a library. Now you need to install and initialize Bref library. So, first step is to configure your terminal with AWS configure that will ask you to insert your AWS credentials, default output format, and default region name. Now, you can install Serverless framework with npm and configure it with your AWS credentials again. Now you can install Bref library with Composer. Composer requires Bref, and initialize it with vendor bin Bref init. This command generates two files on your root project. Index.php, where you can put your custom functions, and serverless.yaml, a configuration file. This is a standard configuration file where usually you have to change only the region name and add the environment of your Symfony application. In this case, app-env prod. In this file, you can specify the layers, you need to specify layers to use, in this case, PHP 7.3 FPM. Now, we are ready to deploy. You need to optimize your dependencies with composer install optimizer autoloader nodev command. And you can deploy with serverless deploy that generates some subroutines like that. And in the end, you can see a link. And if you will click it, you can see your application deployed. We have done 3-4 commands, 5-10 minutes, you have deployed your Symfony application from scratch to Lambda. Very, very easy. But what really happened? Before understand it, we need to understand why we are using Serverless framework. Before it, Bref library used AWS SAM, an open source framework that helps developers to build a serverless application. It provides template specification and command line interface. It's a tool for CloudFormation. And CloudFormation is a bunch of service that works together with a configuration. A bunch of service is like S3 bucket and databases. Okay? And AWS SAM is a configuration. But it's not very easy. It's a little bit complicated in my experience. And you can compare it with Serverless framework configuration. As you can see, AWS SAM is more long. These are standard file. Okay, AWS SAM is more long, more nested, and in my experience is more complicated and complex. Another advantage of Serverless framework is you can take AWS syntax and put into your Serverless framework file. Okay, you can do the opposite. Another advantage of Serverless framework is multi-provider. It means that you can deploy on AWS or on Azure. For example, AWS SAM can deploy only on AWS. For those reasons, Bref community decided to switch from AWS SAM to Serverless framework. And when you launch Serverless deploy command, it translates configuration file, it creates an AWS CloudFormation template, it creates a stack if it's not already created with no resource except for an S3 bucket where your zipped code will be deployed. Now, Serverless Framework compares hashes of new and old files, and if they are different, it generates a new version and deploy your code to your S3 bucket. Lambda automatically understands that new code are uploaded and take it. But pay attention, Lambda is in read-only mode, except for a folder TMP. So if you have your cache into your server, you need to change the path. In this case, I have put a condition to understand if we are on Lambda or not, Lambda task root, and if you are on Lambda, change the cache path to TMP. Another case is CloudWatch, for example, because log files can be stored on CloudWatch with this simple configuration. You can send automatically log files to CloudWatch, an AWS service that is linked to Lambda. We have talked about environment variables because every Symfony application uses environment variables. How can we use it? We have some AWS services like SSM Parameter Store, a free service provided by AWS, where every parameter is put inside a unique store. In my experience, a best practice is to add a prefix to your parameter to understand which application are used that parameter. And you can create those parameters from your AWS console in your browser or with this command, AWS SSM put parameter. You need to specify region, name, type, and value. And you can declare it into your serverless framework file into this way with this syntax. Please don't store environment variables values into this file for security reason. Another AWS service is AWS Secrets Manager. Another AWS service, but it's not free because it has better permission management and you can store JSON values, so a parameter with other parameters inside. Let's make an example. Upload files with Symfony to AWS. You can write an S3 service configuration like that with your environment variables, your S3 client. But pay attention because there are some environment variables that are private from Lambda, like AWS region, AWS key, AWS secret. Now, you can declare it into your serverless YAML file in this way. I have used the SSM syntax in this case. Now, you can create your upload service that upload your files to an S3 bucket, a different S3 bucket, different from the S3 bucket that contains your zipped code files. Because sometimes you can destroy your Lambda, and if you will destroy your Lambda, you will lose all your uploaded files. Lambda could be destroyed if you need to change the region. Okay. Next step could be to trigger our PHP code from events. So we can have a Lambda that upload our photos to an S3 bucket. And another Lambda, when a new photos is uploaded, take it and resize it. How can we do it? With this simple configuration into your serverless framework file. In this case, I have specified that when an event on the S3 bucket photos, an event of object created, with those rules, prefix uploads and suffix.jpg, when an event like that happens, Lambda is called and it calls handler.php, where you can put your PHP code or you can run your Symfony application, whatever you want. You can have many events, okay? Another example is how to use assets. You can change the path of your assets into this way. You need to change the base URL and put to point to another S3 bucket. Another S3 bucket different from the S3 bucket that contains your snippet code for the same reason. If you are using Webpack, you can use this syntax to change the public path. Some question about that? Okay. How many of you use Docker to developing locally? It's not so easy to create a Lambda stack with Docker, but we are lucky because Bref community creates a Docker file for you with 2 services, Bref web with Bref FPM Dev Gateway service, image, and Bref PHP 7.3 FPM for PHP. And here you can declare your environment variables. In this case, you have the same stack of your Lambda. You have recreated your Lambda. Now we can analyze some use case and performance. If you visit the Bref site, you can see a maturity matrix like that, with simplicity, performances, and reliability. Jobs and cron are orange on simplicity, but green on performances and reliability. API are all green. API with MySQL, orange on reliability. Website are green. Legacy application red on simplicity and reliability. But since last month, this maturity matrix was more red. It has many red points because if you are using MySQL service, MySQL with some service or Postgres, you need to use an RDS, a relation database of AWS. It means that you need to put your Lambda into a VPC, a virtual private cloud. And virtual private cloud has cold start. It means that when you call your Lambda, it takes 5 seconds to get started. Very, very slow. For this reason, it wasn't recommended to use Lambda with MySQL or Postgres. But we are lucky again. AWS last month announced that they have improved VPC networking, removing cold start. So now you can use your MySQL or Postgres without problems. This is a very big announcement for us. Let's analyze some jobs and cron, for example, because they are orange on simplicity. Because jobs and cron are perfect for Lambda because our function or service or function called sometimes. But they have a lack of native integration with existing Q libraries. For this reason, simplicity is orange. Red points was for legacy application, because usually legacy applications are monolith application, very big application, not designed for this type of architecture. In my experience, it's better to split your application, your legacy application, into many services and put some of that into Lambda. So, why use AWS Lambda? Because it reduces costs. It's very safe, no infrastructure to manage, and in 10 minutes or less, you have your application deployed from scratch. And when is recommended to use AWS Lambda? When you don't have a complex configuration, because it's not so easy to create and to maintain and to make a good performance, okay? It's recommended when you have an independent service, when you have a website, when you have jobs and cron, when you have an API-based system, and more and more and more. Thank you.